first day. The day begins, Volkler is ahead of Armstrong by 22 seconds. By the end of the day, Volkler was behind Armstrong by 9.5 minutes. He had been a strong performer until he got to the most difficult part of the race. Then his performance changed completely. The leader became a laggard. He would never be in contention again. Second day of the race, there was still an Italian rider named Ivan Basso, who Armstrong was very worried about. He had said so publicly. We consider him a threat. Because of the way they started that day, Armstrong started 2 minutes behind Basso. He passed him on the way up the mountain. Won that stage. Basso would not be a threat again for the remainder of the race. Third and final day of the 3 days in the Alps, there were still 2 German racers who were a threat. During that day, one of them was not able to make a move, but the other one did. And near the end, he tried a sprint. He tried to just go absolutely all out in the final portion of the race. And in fact, with only 600 yards to go, this other German racer had a lead of 110 yards, a clearly insurmountable lead. And yet at that point, Armstrong found reserves of energy no one imagined. He stunned the crowd, roared after this guy, uphill, beat him by a half a bicycle length across the finish line. Neither of the German riders would be a factor again after that. The point of the story is, 3 stages remained in the race at that point. They still had 18, 19, and 20. But everybody who knew racing understood that the race was over. That the lead had been determined in the most difficult stages. Leaders had become laggards. Laggard had become the leader. And nothing that anybody could do in the flat, easy stages that remained would be able to change that. Well, this obviously is a story for our time. The most difficult, most brutal conditions are when the competitive order gets determined. It's when the leaders become laggards and laggards become leaders. And when the road gets flat and easy, it is very, very difficult to change the competitive order. That's why this relatively brief time in our economic cycle, just like those brief 3 days in the race, are the greatest time of opportunity. Because they are when the competitive order gets determined. So that's what we're in right now. What are the best business leaders doing to take advantage of this tremendous opportunity? I'm going to mention briefly 5 things that I have observed. I didn't think them up. I'm not saying them because they seem like they ought to make sense. I get a chance to observe lots of companies and business leaders. This is what I've seen them do. First one, sounds easy, it isn't, is they reset their priorities to reflect this new situation. Okay? We all went into this with plans, goals of one kind or another that we were very intent on. It isn't easy to give them up, especially in an organization. It isn't easy to give them up. And it can even feel like defeatism or something. Well, it isn't. The world has changed, and it is crazy to pretend otherwise. I was at an event not long ago where this was at actually end of last year, with Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, one of the few very successful major New York banks to come through all of this thing. Here's what he said. I was very struck by it. He said, "I am shocked at the number of people who are watching that train coming down the track," meaning the recession, watching that train coming down the track, and they're still worrying about their strategic plan for 2009. We canceled all that stuff, all of it, meetings, travel, you name it, to focus on the fact that we're in the middle of a real crisis. Okay. It sounds easy to do. but it's hard to do. Nonetheless, it is critically important. The world has changed. Let's say it has changed. Make everybody understand. And reset the priorities. Growth targets, expansions, various strategies, they just may not make sense anymore. Second of the five things. The best companies and best leaders are focusing on the core. Now, they are focusing and investing in their core. Almost all companies have to make cuts in a time like this. We've certainly been doing it where I work. Most companies I know have had to do it one way or another. The question is deciding what must be cut and what must not be cut. And the best companies understand what their core really is, and they figure out ways to invest in that rather than to cut it. Lots of examples. Actually, one of the great examples is what DuPont did in the Depression. In the first couple of years of the Depression, they followed the conventional course and reduced their R&D spending as their revenues fell. It's what most companies did. It's what a lot of companies still do. But then they said, you know what? That's insane for us. In our business, doing the basic research, doing chemical research, is the core of what we do. We must not cut that. So they made a decision, and they were very explicit about it. We are going to keep spending on chemical research no matter what. And they did, all through the terrible years of the Depression. And the result was nylon and neoprene and products that brought